we were very concerned at the prospect of Julian Assange's prosecution because the charges he was facing essentially related to activities that were, broadly speaking, journalistic. And our concern was that if he were successfully prosecuted, it would create a precedent that would endanger journalists all over the world. So the fact that he won't now face those charges, unless the appeal is successful, is enormously heartening and very, very good news so far as we're concerned. That said, the judge, when she set out her reasoning, rejected a great many of the arguments made by Assange's defense team relating to the journalistic nature of what he had done, and dismissed the application to extradite him only on the grounds of the suicide risk and his mental health. Now, that's a lot better than it not happening, but I would have been much happier if she had made clear that the defense of free expression and the defense of journalistic practice were reason enough not to allow the extradition.
Okay, you said broadly speaking journalistic. What do you say then that Julian Assange's actions put sources at risk, some of whom have disappeared since, as well as links that potentially tie him to election interference when it came to Donald Trump's election?
Well, Julian Assange has had a very rich and varied life and has undertaken all kinds of activities. The Americans were seeking to prosecute him very specifically for the business of identifying a source who believed he had witnessed wrongdoing and helping that source to pass him information in a discreet way. Those are the actions of an investigative journalist. The prosecution, or the attempt to prosecute him, didn't relate in any way to the Democratic National Committee leaks, for example. I have no idea where those came from, and I think perhaps now, with his liberty in prospect, it would be a good thing if Julian Assange cast some further light on it. But what was always the issue for me was that his prosecution risked criminalizing journalistic activity, and whether you like Julian Assange or not, whether you continue to feel concerned about other aspects of his behavior, which I perfectly understand, it was the nature of the charges that were brought against him that were really of the greatest concern to me. And
can I just interrupt you there? I'm terribly sorry to interrupt you there, because I can hear what you're saying, that that was what was the greatest concern to you. But I was just asking you specifically, as a member of the NUJ, what you felt in terms of sources being put at risk when it came to investigative journalism and Julian Assange's actions.
Sure, absolutely. Forgive me for not picking that up. The interesting thing about the risk that arose from the big data dumps, the Iraq and the Afghan war logs, is that the Americans put a great deal of effort into trying to find examples of people who had suffered harm, detriment, or had died as a result of that information being made public. They did this as part of the prosecution of Chelsea Manning. And the embarrassing fact for the Americans is that they could find none. In some respects, it's not surprising. From the moment that he had the information, Assange had worked quite closely with the Americans to try and redact the information. Indeed, they spent the better part of a year trying to redact them. And it was through a series of clumsy and rather bizarre errors, some of them Julian Assange's, to be clear, that the information became public. But it had been clear to the Americans for so long by that time that the information ran the risk of becoming public, that I suspect they had warned a great many of those people who were likely to be affected. So, I mean, for me personally, I believe that the protection of sources and the protection of the safety of people who might be described in journalistic material is very important. I actually believe that this is something that Julian Assange took very seriously and worked painstakingly with the Guardian, the New York Times, and Der Spiegel. Mm-hmm. So, it was fundamentally a cock-up, but I don't think an error of that kind is something that merits prosecution and a potential 175 years in prison.